reached in the past a lot. And for anyone that doesn't know, can you tell us a little bit about how did you start? Where did the passion come from? How'd you go from I like this, I appreciate this,
Right.
I want to do this for the rest of my life?
Right. Well, again, I think I started drawing being influenced by comics like I think an entire generation did. There are images in my Silver Age book that I remember tracing and copying with my brother over and over and over again. And they're in the book now. But I think I'm not just speaking for myself. I would bet if you asked every comic artist from the John Byrne generation to today, they all went through the same thing. But I think if you ask filmmakers, guys like Steven Spielberg and J.J. Abrams, Steven Spielberg was making Super 8 millimeter films when he was a kid. So I think, and look at musicians. I mean, you start playing music when you're a kid, and next thing you know, 20 years later, you're in a band. So I don't think it's any different for any other art form.
But did
But
you
I
have
think
the
with
support?
comics,
Because that's a big decision
yes,
to say this is what
absolutely.
I want to do with my life.
Well, here's the thing.
Right.
I knew I was going to be an artist since I was 3 years old. So I never went through that identity crisis that everybody goes through when they're older, a teenager, whatever. On the other hand, my mother, who raised my brother and I alone, she was a widow. My father died when I was 4 months old. She was very easygoing. But she came from that generation that grew up during the Depression that was worried, are you going to make a living as an artist? I think this country encourages art, but just as many, if not more, people are discouraged from going to the arts because of the old economic thing of, oh, you're not going to make a living. But the ones that do, whether they have their parental support or not, I mean, can end up making it. So I went through that period when I was a teenager where I thought I would be a comic book artist. And when I was in high school, the great comic artist Walt Simonson had just come out of Rhode Island School of Design and made a splash in comics. And I recognized his style as being radically different. And he had a sense of graphic design, but I didn't even know what the term graphic design was. But I did read that he was a recent graduate of Rhode Island School of Design. And I didn't know of it, but I knew my decision was either to go to art school or to go to a university with a good art department, again, so that you can major in something else in case art doesn't come through. So I went to RISD thinking I'll become a comic book artist. But when I got there, I did my research freshman year, and it turns out the graphic design department was better rated than the illustration department. And when I learned about graphic design, it's verbal and visual communication working together. Well, what are comics but words and pictures working together? I was a child of advertising, and the traditional print ad is a headline with an image. And I remember reading somewhere, if you cover up the image, the headline should not make sense. If you cover up the headline, the image should not make sense. They've got to work together symbiotically. And just like in comics, the caption should not just tell you what you're looking at. The text in a great comic panel should supplement what you're seeing and vice versa. If you read the graphic novel Watchmen, that's a perfect example. Alan Moore is a genius at this, at writing the text to go with the image, but not to explain what the image is doing, but to work off of it in that great combination that we call comics.
In your book, Eight Legends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carmine Infantino, Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, Gil Kane, Gene Colan, Joe Kubert, Jim Steranko, Neil Adams.
Yeah.
You compare these guys to the Renaissance masters, no?
Absolutely. The way we look back as art historians on the great Renaissance masters of the human figure like Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Raphael, I really believe, and this really hit home when they started all dying off. I mean, Infantino died a year ago. Kubert died 2 years ago. Gene Colan died 3 years ago. Steranko and Adams were once the Young Turks, and they're both in their mid-70s now. So I really believe that future art historians, or maybe aliens, are going to look back 500 years from now on our great masters of the human figure, like Jack Kirby and Joe Kubert, and realize that there were giants who walked the earth in our day. And maybe, and this is where one person can make a difference in the world, maybe my works, my book, my lectures will be what they look towards to help make that claim.
I saw one of your lectures, and you had a good point about how they compared Kirby to Adams. Like Adam.
No, I actually compared. Well, I compared Kirby to Michelangelo.
No. I meant how some people were saying like, well, Jack created everything, and Neil didn't create things, and you brought up how, in a way, Neil did, because we saw what he did with these guys, right?
Well, what Neil did is a very postmodern idea. We use the term reboot when we want to talk about something that is recreated for a new time. That's a very postmodern idea. What Neil did, he may not have created Batman, but he recreated Batman in a postmodern way. He took Green Arrow, who was a carbon copy of Batman. He had the Arrow car, the Arrow signal. And it was ludicrous.
He even had his own Robin.
Exactly. Speedy. And he remade Green Arrow. He recreated it or rebooted him and made him his own. So Neil Adams, I think, is falsely judged by the people who are very quick to praise Kirby and say, oh, well, Kirby created characters, Neil didn't. Well, they're missing the postmodern aspect of recreation being as valid as creating.
Well, I'd rather see recreation like Neil Adams did than just taking a character and changing the sex of it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, this is what we've come to today. You know, I mean, well, because like I was born in the late '60s, so I didn't have that. I mean, I know the '60s were a turbulent time, Cold War. I mean, JFK, RFK, MLK. I mean, I could just, I hear from my parents what was going on. So I was more like in the late '70s, '80s growing up. So I bought there was Chaikin and Byrne, and
right.
I was buying those. And just like you, I was like, ooh, I want to know more about the past.
Right.
And that's when I started, finding
right.
Kirby and Adams and all this. And it's just the luck of the draw when you're born, that period, And
yeah, but I mean, that's what history is all about.
Yeah.
It's not just learning what's of your time. It behooves all of us to go back and learn the history. And again, it's no different in music or in film. Look at a guy like Quentin Tarantino. He's very much of his time, but he knows his history. A guy like Martin Scorsese is very much of his time, but knows his film history. Spielberg. I think all the greats in any art form are also very knowledgeable about the history of their art form, because that's how you learn. And that's how you take motifs and you update them and you remake them. I mean, look at a group like the Black Keys in music. They're very current and very hip. But if you listen to their music and you know your history, they know their history. And you could pick up riffs and motifs that they've gotten from what we call classic rock.
That'll give them a longer staying power.
Well, yeah.
In that way. Where do you think comics going to be in the next 20 years? It's still going to be around? I mean, digital? I mean, what do you kind of worried about it?
I've been hearing about the death of print. Really, I mean, ever since I think the 70s, they've been talking about the death of print. Now, if you look at newspapers, they are dying because of advertising. Rolling Stone magazine is, a quarter of an inch thin. I remember when it was an inch thick. So, yeah, I mean, print to a certain degree is dying. And yet, again, look at these beautiful hardcover books that we have more than ever. So it's a weird dichotomy of what's happening in digital and the fact that print is still alive. There's something about turning pages that is very human friendly. I know there's all these digital comics and motion comics, but I don't know. I'm a lover of print. So I love turning the page. The fact that my book will have an ebook version, I'm very excited about, but I certainly don't want it to take the place of the print book. And my ad campaign for the ebook is that if you love the ebook, you'll love the real book, meaning the actual print book. But I'm excited that these images that were meant for print look so beautiful, like you said, Dean, on the electronic platform. They leap off the screen. So I think this whole generation now that is only on the ebook platforms, I hope they discover the book and it makes them get the print book and fall in love with print. So I don't know where things are going to go. I mean, ironically, the influence of comics in our culture is bigger than ever. Tonight, the TV show Gotham is going to premiere. We've got The Flash on TV. You've got Netflix doing Daredevil and 4 other Marvels. You've got the movies. And yet, the readership of the comics is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
The biggest selling comic right now, 30 years ago, would have been discontinued for low sales. What's happening is people are not coming out of the movie theater and going into the comic book store.